What is going on? I am back. Waiting on YouTube to connect. All right, so YouTube is live. So what's going on, guys? So if you are wondering why you see me on doing this and where exactly all this is going, so these are recordings that I do, and then I end up taking the audio off of these recordings and I end up posting them onto my podcast, One Life with Donnie Rouse. So if you search Apple, Spotify, search One Life with Donnie Rouse, all the content that I've been recording here is going to come up. So you don't necessarily have to, watch it on Facebook, but you can literally watch it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or whatever other podcast platform there is. So that's why you see me doing maybe 3 a day, because I'm just kind of, when I get inspired, I come on here, record, and then I post them. And I'm going to be doing a lot more different types of posts. But I like doing these because these are experiences that I have in my own life, learnings, lessons that I learn that I feel like I can share with you. So without further ado, hi guys, my name is Donnie Rouse, and you are listening to the podcast, One Life. Too old to travel. It is our inside world, our inner worlds, that create our outer worlds. So if we are ever experiencing dis-ease, the first place we should be looking is what's going on in that thing between our ears, our minds, because that is what's shaping the experience we're having in the outside world. There was a quote I heard. It said, we aren't experiencing the world, we get to experience ourselves. So the way we change that experience is by expanding our mind, by taking in new things. As a result of that, when we change our inner world, our outer world changes. So let's think of where are you, where do you have like a negative belief, right? Or you're like, well, how do I identify that negative belief? I mean, those things literally, they come and go as easy. Well, sometimes they like to stay longer than they like to take off. But think of an area where there was some emotional distress, where you felt like there's a belief system in place where you may not even be conscious of it. Now, I'm about to give you an example from one of my most recent trips, and then maybe it'll become easier for you to understand. And then when you found that thing, say, well, what is the belief here? And is it true? Is it true 100% of the time? Is it true absolutely? And then open your mind and say, well, what if it's not absolute? What if I adopted the opposite belief? What if I believed something different? And then again, I'll go into my story. It'll all make sense. So you're probably wondering, too old to travel. Where is this title even coming from? Most recently, I was in Ireland. I went there for my birthday. I travel every year for my birthday. And this year I chose to do Ireland and Northern Ireland. Flying into Dublin, I landed at my hostel. And for one of the first things I noticed at the hostel was that it was extremely young. This has only happened one other time when I was in Italy traveling in Bologna. In Bologna, there was a lot of college students, but there wasn't enough housing to house those students. So as a result, students would stay. They would come into the city for 3 days. They would stay in a hostel before going back home and then repeating it the following week for their classes. I suspect that was the same thing that was happening in Ireland. While I was there, I feel like I would check in and all of a sudden I was just around like a dozen youths. I'm like, well, all right, well, the first thought that I thought, I was like, man, all right, I'm 41. Am I getting too old to travel? And it was when my experience is shifting here. But I'm not really sure that was true. Or at least when I was first experiencing it. I'll tell you how the belief changed at the end of the trip and then how it changed post-trip. So I was starting to ponder this. I was like, all right, well, it's very young here. Spent a couple days, and I ended up going up to Belfast. In Belfast, it wasn't as bad there. And actually, it was still, but the hostel was smaller, so there weren't as many people, so it wasn't as like shocking as it was in Dublin. So from Belfast, I'll kind of take you through the journey. I went to Belfast to Derry or Londonderry, however you want to call it, down to Galway, and then from Galway, Killarney, Ring of Kerry, over to Kinsale, up to Blarney, up to Cashel, back to Dublin, making a bunch of stops in between. And the entire time I was there, it was frustrating for me because, one, I was expecting to meet some fellow travelers where I can invite them into my car and take a road trip. I'd had those experiences in the past, and they were some of the best experiences I'd ever had. But when I was in Galway, when I was in, where else did I go? Well, mainly like Galway. I just noticed that there was packed with students, and every time I had to make a plan my itinerary and book accommodations, the accommodations were always booked. Like I couldn't find a place. It was very frustrating. It was one of the most challenging times I've had traveling. Because of that, I like to go on a whim. I like to say, okay, here I am. What do I want to do today? Oh, let's go here. Get inspired, go there. Like, well, what's next? I don't really like to plan everything because, then all of a sudden I'm on a time schedule. Regress. So I'm in Galway and I experienced very much the same thing. And then I went back to Dublin. And when I was back in Dublin, I remember checking into one of my rooms, and like I check in, it was a pod hostel. And, there's a bunch of, if you've ever been to pod hostels, it's not like they're just open beds. They're literally cubes. It's Japanese style, where you have like a cube. It's almost like a little mini room. And I go into the room, and there's like 6 college girls. And I'm like, all right, this is kind of weird. And, started talking to them. They were actually getting ready to go out that night. And they were all like, they had cracking bottles of wine. I was like, I remember those years. And when I came back, I was telling people the story of my trip. I was like, yeah, I felt older when I was there. And like, all right, well, after having some time to reflect on it, I was like, well, all right, well, what was, like, I was looking at my experience. Well, is it really that I'm just old and that is what's happening, and maybe I should stop traveling? Thankfully, at the time, I was reading the book Psycho-Cybernetics, and it had me question a lot of beliefs. And I started questioning the belief of age. Right? We say age, you're right, age every 12 months, you're a year older. Well, what if it was 15 months, right? So, all right, so I'm 41 now. If it were every 15 months, that would make me 31. And just having this small change in perception, literally, I felt lighter. I'm like, oh, well, wow, if I'm 31, there's a lot more energy to go around. I could do a lot of things that, I could do things that I couldn't do at 41, which brings the second point. Beliefs about where you are in life. Like we have these beliefs around like where we should be, what we should be doing at a certain age, when it really is all just shit. It really is all just shit. It's stuff from the culture saying, this is what you should be doing at this time. You should have the car, you should have the house, you should have kids. It's just crap, right? There is no, every single person's life is completely different. So when I was looking at these, these shoulds that I have, and when I had this idea of shedding off literally 10 years of my life, I literally felt the change happen physiologically without anything happening, right? It was just thinking differently about my age. When I made that distinction, I looked back at the trip. I was like, yeah, well, literally the entire time I was there, excuse me, the entire time I was there, I was playing this over in my head. That like, oh, I'm older. And when I recognized the processes that were going on in my mind, there's no reason. I mean, I understand now how it was being portrayed in my outside world, because that is what was going on in my inside world. I've been on many trips where that was never, it didn't matter. Like I would hang out with kids all ages. I would hang out with kids who were 18, people who were 18, we won't call them kids because I think some 18-year-olds are more mature than 50-year-olds. I was hanging out with people from all different ages, from 18 up to like 50, mid-50s, 60s, whatever. It didn't mean anything, right? But now I was putting this unconscious, I should say, unconscious thought into being too old. And it shaped my experience so. Where do these things come from, right? mean, sociological. Like I look at people around me, comments from friends. Oh, what are you doing? You should really start to settle down. Comments from my parents. These are all people's inputs that are coming in that have nothing to do with your life path. Nothing to do. They are putting their experiences on you when it's not their life. Right? You're the only one that could decide your experience. You're the only one who knows what is right for you. Nobody else. But if you allow them to literally layer, all of a sudden you realize that like you have all these little blankets on you and you can't move. Because all of their layers on there that you can't even recognize what's inside because you've been stifled. So how do you get out of that? You get out of that by first becoming aware on what are the shoulds that you've been following? Whose opinions, whose advices have you been allowing to impact your life? As I just mentioned, I was thinking of my parents' inputs, friends of mine who would say that stuff, and then cultural beliefs, right? Because I don't know many people who are my age who are traveling and doing the things that I'm doing, right? So there was a cultural aspect to it too. But if I look in hindsight, like if I'm honest with myself, this is how I want to live. I don't want to live any other way. I mean, yeah, a wife and kids. Do I want a wife and kids? Yeah, maybe someday. And I realize that there's still work I have to do on myself around the belief systems and the emotion about like even relationships. That'll come too someday. But right now I'm living the way I want to live. Why am I so I'm telling you this because I want you to become aware of those areas of your life where maybe you're being influenced. Maybe, I mean, one of the easiest ones is like, well, get a job after work up the corporate ladder, save your money, and then go experience life. I have a big problem with that because you may spend all your time trying to build this security, this foundation. But sometimes it's at the cost of your health. It's at the cost of your freedom, right? And this is not an absolute statement, but if you have wife, kids, all these other responsibilities, not to say that you can't do all those things you want to do, but it does add a layer of difficulty. Like I have one of my friends, she was like, well, I don't believe in that just because you have kids. I was like, no, but it makes things more difficult, right? If I'm traveling with a mortgage, if I have a house, and I can't just freely pick up. Now I got to figure out like, all right, well, I have to make sure I have the money set aside to pay for my mortgage, to pay for my car versus, if I don't own anything. And it's just like, all right, well, I'm just going to get up and leave. Right. So that is what I'm trying to hint. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Not so much that because you're in a situation that you're doomed. That's not the case, right? I also truly believe that whatever you are focused on, whatever you're 100% committed to, you can make happen. But it makes it difficult, right? If I want to go out, if I want to eat out every night, but I want to have like the most amazing body of a god, like of an Adonis. You got that? Put that Don in there. You can't have everything. Maybe when I was 20, right? I could eat anything I wanted, and I could literally burn it instantaneously. So there's sacrifices that have to be made, as well as conscious decisions. So what I want you to do is I want you to just wake up from what society has been telling you, what your family, your friends, your religion, everything's been telling you, and tune it all out and tune inward to say, what is it that you want? Right? And then look at the beliefs that you have around the things you want. If something brought you joy, but now all of a sudden it's changing, maybe it is a real life change. Maybe you're growing as a person as a result. What you desire in your life is changing. But maybe it's what other people have been telling you, allowing like these little drops to slowly build up to all of a sudden now it's a pool and you're drowning in everyone else's thoughts, everyone else's beliefs. If that's where you are, I want you to start to rise above the water and get out of other people's pool. Make your own pool. So let's get back to it. What is like a thing that a belief that you've been struggling against? Like I gave you my story. You understand what I mean by this, right? Is that something that you've been piling it on, it doesn't feel good. And when you step back, you realize it's just because you've been living through someone else's belief system and not following your own heart. Whose belief was it? What is the scotoma? Right? The scotoma is the thing that we can't see, right? It's out of sight. It's sometimes it's because we told ourselves something so often over and over again that it could be right in plain sight, but we still can't see it. Tony Robbins always gives the example at his seminars. If your parent asks you, grab me the salt, you're like, I don't know where the salt is. I don't know where the salt is. You open the cabinet, there's no salt here. And literally, your father or mother comes over, like, it's right here. And they show you, and it literally was right in front of your face, but why couldn't you see it? It's because you told yourself that you couldn't see it. And as a result, your mind said, okay, I can't see it. And even though it was there, it literally skipped over it because you had the belief that you couldn't see it. What are those scotomas? And the way I want you to look at this scotoma is, what are the belief systems that you're allowing to run unconsciously about this thing that you want or this thing that brings you joy? This could also be like, believing that you have to have kids by a certain age and, that life has to be a certain way. There is no formula for life. You are the writer of your own life book. And then lastly, how else can you see it? Isn't absolutely 100% true? If it's not absolute, what if you chose the opposite viewpoint? Right? If I said, all right, I'm 41, I'm too old to travel. What if it's like, I can get along with anybody. I enjoy seeing the world. There are people who are my age and older who are adventuring and traveling the world and having these amazing experiences. I choose to do that too. Choosing to do that, choosing to have a different viewpoint changes how you see, how you color the entire experience. So that is what I want to give you guys today. I just want you to look at the beliefs all around your life and just start to question. Questioning makes it fun, right? Because life could get pretty rigid when you don't stop to question your beliefs, because they're just this layering on of all of these influences. Question is it absolutely true, right? You may say, oh, well, that's wrong, what the person's doing. Is it? For whose life? Is it absolute? Some people like living this certain way. And realize that it's just a belief system you chose consciously or unconsciously to adopt. And also just take a moment to see, well, how could life be differently if I chose the opposite? Life happens on the inside, not on the outside. It is our internal world that creates